Welcome. Welcome to this place where people have gathered in times of grief and gladness and gratitude. My name is Reverend Kathleen Rollens. I serve as the interim senior minister here at Unity Church-Unitarian. I was so fortunate to have met Daisi before she died and to learn something about her hopes for this service. And one important hope she conveyed was that though our grief is real, she wanted to be sure that this service was also a celebration of her life. And she wanted to make very sure that the music was from Brazilian composers, as they are. So while we grieve, we are also here to recall the exuberant and vital way that she lived her life. So this gathering is a time for us to acknowledge that indeed our joy and our woe are woven fine through laughter and tears, memories and stories. We will bring Daisi close to us once more. In our faith tradition as Unitarian Universalists, we light a chalice to symbol the light of truth and the warmth of community, the fire of commitment. And we also light a chalice to mark time as holy, when a child is born or adopted, when a marriage is celebrated, and when a life is complete. So today we kindle this flame in honor and in memory of the life of Daisi Gavoli Martin. Unity Church's traditions also include what we call words on grief. And in some ways, we state the obvious that gatherings such as this bring grief and loss to the surface, because we know that grief comes to us all. It was Helen Keller who recognized the universality of grief when she wrote, "We bereaved are not alone. We belong to the largest company in the world, the company of those who have known suffering. And when it seems that our sorrow is too great to be borne, let us think of the great family of the heavy-hearted into which our grief has given us entrance. And inevitably, we will feel about us their arms, their sympathy, and their understanding." There are some things which all of us know about grief. That there is no one right way to grieve. Each one of us finds our own way. We live through the early agony of loss, and over time we do come to a sense of peace. But we also know that grief doesn't go away completely. Instead, time teaches us to weave each loss into our lives, despite the pain, to let the blessings come, and recognize how we can become stronger and more compassionate when mourning has its way with us. Though we are in the presence of death, it is life that calls us together today, her life, and the life we share. So let us grieve as we will, and yet in our grieving, we do celebrate the unique and precious life that was Daisi Gavoli Martin. I invite you, if you're willing and able, to rise and join with me in the responsive reading found in your order of service. As the rising of the sun and at its going down, at the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, at the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, at the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, at the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, at the beginning of the year and when it ends, when we are lost and sick at heart, when we have joy we crave to share, when we have decisions that are difficult to make. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us, and we remember them. You may be seated. The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Daisi Gavioli Martin was born on September 25th, 1943, in Porto Alegre, the capital of the state of Rio Grande do Sul, Brazil, to José Gavioli Sobrinho and to Sarah Medeiros Gavioli. She was raised as a Baptist and went to Baptist school as a child, leaving the church because she said the Baptists didn't allow swimming on Sundays, and Daisy loved to swim. When she was a bit older, she swam competitively. She said her mother had a lot of strength, even though she became quite ill with polio. But her mother became an artist, and a few of those paintings made their way to Daisy's home in St. Paul. she recalls her father being a very strong person, a man of intense emotions. Daisi obtained a bachelor's degree in philosophy and sociology from the Federal University of Rio Grande, and she could have stayed in Brazil. But Daisi wanted to see the world. And by making that decision, Daisi did take the road less traveled, the one that led her into a life she could not have anticipated when she left her hometown in Brazil. In 1968, she arrived in the United States under the Twin Cities International Program for Youth Leaders and Social Workers, and she was placed at the home of the Good Shepherd in St. Paul, working with emotionally disturbed adolescent girls. And then, something happened, which was to change her life forever. This is a story from one of Jim's friends, Brick Chapman. He writes, "In the spring of 1968, Buzz Lagos invited me to attend a talk he was giving to the nuns and residents of the Home of the Good Shepherd regarding the upcoming presidential election. The night of meeting, we were all sitting in a big circle, and as Buzz began to talk, I found I wasn't listening because I was focused on this beautiful young woman sitting outside the circle directly across from me. After the meeting, I introduced myself, and she told me her name was Daisi Gavioli from Porto Alegre, Brazil. I asked her out for coffee, and then a few weeks later, I introduced her to Jim and George Kaler, Jim Martin and George Kaler, at Awada's Bar on Selby Avenue in St. Paul. We sat in a booth in the back and talked and laughed for several hours. Later that evening, Jim came into my room at 546 Marshall Avenue, where we were both living, and said, I really like Daisi. I think I'd like to ask her out. And then this memory from George Kaler about the same time. I was with Jim when our mutual friend Brick Chapman introduced Daisi to Jim and me. One characteristic that stood out that night as we casually sipped beer in John Awada's bar was her cheerfulness. Despite being newly arrived in the United States and being in a dark neighborhood bar with two strange men, she positively illuminated the conversation with her sunny personality. Well, since that initial meeting, 2 weeks went by, and Jim did decide to call Daisi and ask her out on a date. Daisi got dressed to the nines for this date, looking very fashionable. Now, there is some dispute in family lore about where Jim took Daisi for that first date. Jim remembers that their first date was at Mickey's Diner over hamburgers and fries. Daisi was still learning English, and Jim spoke no Portuguese. But attraction has its own form of communication. There was something sparking between them. Daisi was on a student visa, which after some time of dating, they realized the student visa would expire, and she would have to return to Brazil. So Daisi and Jim had a decision to make. Should she return to Brazil, or should they get married? Jim says that although he initially wanted to take the relationship a lot slower, he could not bear the thought of her getting on the plane, which would take her away from him, and perhaps he would never see her again. He went to a shop in Dinkytown, he bought a ring, and he proposed to her that night. And on June 7th, 1969, they were married upstairs in Ames Chapel, and thus their married life began. The first of many great adventures was to hitchhike for 3 months from Minnesota to La Paz, Bolivia, and then flying to Brazil, where they lived for 3 years. And their son Marcus was born in Brazil in 1971, followed by son Andre, who was born in 74. The Martin family then settled into creating a life and a home in St. Paul, where Daisi began a 40-year career in social and human services. She was known as a gifted program developer with a keen eye for hiring young talent. She was a strong leader and had a very strong work ethic. Whether she was counseling or advocating for the elderly, recruiting and training college students, or providing services to immigrants, refugees, and others in transition or crisis, Daisi was a fierce defender and protector of the most vulnerable. And although she could be tough and firm and decisive, she also had a big, warm heart. She cared deeply about her family, her friends, her community, and developed lifelong friendships. After her long and rewarding career, she retired in 2008. She and Jim had such a rich life together. Over the years, they traveled to Brazil, of course, regularly, keeping close ties with her Brazilian family and roots. And she and Jim traveled to Italy, France, Sweden, Norway, Alaska, just to name a few of their adventures. She loved reading and gardening, cultivating flowers. She enjoyed her children and her grandchildren enormously, living life to the fullest. When she was diagnosed with a rare brain disease known as progressive supranuclear palsy, she lived life still as fully as she could until she decided she would be released from a body which no longer served her. And she died peacefully with Jim by her side on April 23rd, 2024. Our tradition at Unity is to invite what we call a collage of voices. And sometimes we get maybe 6 or 7. But as soon as the call was issued, they poured in from so many parts of Daisi's life, so many stories, many of which we will hear in just a moment. But I'm going to turn now to those who knew Daisi, 2 of the people who knew Daisi so well, her son Marcus, who will speak, and her husband Jim. And I invite you to come forward now.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Marcus. So my mom, who I called Mai, she was not a still person. She was active, she was decisive, she was opinionated. As you heard earlier, she started her adult life moving a continent away to make her own life choices, independent from family expectations. In our house, she ran the show. She pushed us to be independent. When I was 16, she announced, "Enough, I am done cooking." So we took turns cooking for the family. My brother and I are cooks to this day. My dad, not so much. She set our values. She pushed us to excel. And we remember once when my brother proudly showed her his report card, all A's. She nodded, and she said, "Pretty good." And from then on, that was our standard. If you did the best, you were pretty good, which was better than good. She, like many in our family history, she valued education. As you heard earlier, she was a philosophy major. She didn't really act like one. She wasn't really patient, not pondering type of person. She was determined. You don't get a chance to represent your country as a swimmer in Pan Am Games without determination. You don't get a master's degree as an adult without discipline. But, as you heard too, she was driven to help others. As a social worker, she really witnessed the poles of life. First working with troubled youth and later with the elderly. She valued connections. Our home culture was her culture. Portuguese inside, English outside. We had long meals, even if she was the fastest eater I knew. It's another thing that kind of set us apart in our home from my family's friends. Our family, rather, from my other family's friends. But family was important, even from afar. Connecting with family across long distances was hard. A single phone call could cost the equivalent of $200 today. She opened up our household, starting with an extended stay by my oldest cousins in Brazil. In return, my brother and I, we each lived in Brazil for a time. And later, another stay by my younger cousins. So, building connections each time. My cousin Pachi, she told me that my mom helped bring the family back together after she retired as a snowbird, going back and forth from Brazil. She was stylish. She had many signature outfits. You can see a Polaroid of her marrying my dad in a mini wedding cake style dress. Like some of you here, I imagine, she had many shoes. Nothing could be torn, nothing could be faded. She did have a beautiful flower garden. I hated weeding it, I still do. She liked art for its beauty and its meaning. So she collected statuettes made by one of her earliest clients, Daisi. We brought one today. Her disease, PSP, it brought on a slow paralysis about 5 years ago. First, kind of a loss of grip. After that, kind of a wavering balance. Next, kind of a permanent lowering of the eyes. She had an unaffected memory, but a faltering tongue. A non-responsive left leg, clenched fist, and lots of coughing. Before my mom would commit to reading a book, she'd flip to the back and see if it ended happily. And in a way, I imagine that's what she hopes we're doing today. Seeing a pretty good life, filtered through memories. But seeing her is just one point of view from home. So seeing her with others here and in Brazil was a window into her friendships, her deep connections. So we want to hear from you too. Thank you for sharing your love today.
Well, I want to correct one thing that about Brick Chapman. He took her out on a date, took her out on several dates, and things were kind of plateauing between Brick and Daisy, and so he shared that with me, and I said, well, Brick, is it okay if I ask her out? And he said, oh, sure. I mean, this is the 60s, this is the Beatles. The Beatles, what's it called? All you need is love, 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 And, Bob Dylan, the times there are changing. So there was a lot of things were changing in the 60s, so it was okay. So he said, Brick, one condition. And I said, well, Brick, what's that? He said, well, I need permission that I can still take her out if I need to. So I said, Brick, hey, this is the 60s, fine, no problem, We're good buds, we're friends. Nothing. This is no problem at all. Well, our first date, they mentioned that we went to, to Mickey's Diner. Mickey's Diner is it looked like an old railroad car that somehow got lost and ended up in someplace downtown St. Paul. And I was trying to impress her, so I thought she needs a little bit of this Americana, what the United States is all about. Well, she shows up with looking fantastic. High heels, nylons, tight skirt, rouge, perfect lipstick. Her hair is pulled back. Whew, so we walk into Mickey's Diner, and there's these half a dozen guys slumped over their cups of coffee. And, their heads snapped over there to see Daisy. And I thought, oh, God, I hope they don't wreck their necks. So I ordered for Daisy the best cuisine that money can buy at Mickey's Diner. Burgers, fries, Cokes, and malts. Trying to impress her. Well, then we entered into a 9-month courtship, relationship, that kids, I'm going to talk a little bit about marriage here, and we've got some kids up here that I thought we could help them learn a little bit about what marriage is all about. So that's what I'm going to try to explain to these kids here. We went together for maybe a month, and then Christmas arrived, and she was feeling homesick, and I was feeling kind of suffocating being with Daisy all the time. And I don't know, I can't explain it, but it was a mutual decision. We're going to kind of break off for a while. Well, that didn't last so long. We get back together again. But then, their clock is ticking. She has to go back to Brazil, and now it's probably maybe 7 months. And I thought, things are getting kind of close between us. We better just call it off because we don't want to get too close. It'd be hard to separate. So I said, Daisy, I think we ought to break up. Oh, she kicked a chair that went flying across the room and hit the wall. I thought, oh, wow, I'd never seen such, Latin American passion like that. I'm kind of a, Scandinavian type guy, and our people don't do stuff like that. So we broke up, but there was one problem. We had planned a ski trip to Colorado, and we both wanted to go. So I called her up and said, Daisy, should we call off the ski trip? And she wanted to go too. So we decided, well, let's do this. We'll go on the ski trip, but we won't say a word about breaking up. We'll pretend like we're not breaking up. So, it was magical. We pretended the whole 10 days we weren't breaking up. We had a great time together. We're coming back to real life in the car, And that argument just came right back. I parked in front of the little bungalow where she lived. She got out of the car and didn't say a word, went to her door, opened it up, went in, slammed it shut, boom, that's it. Maybe that's, I might not ever see her again. So, but as Reverend Kathleen said, I had this image of Daisy leaving me, walking out on the tarmac, on the pavement to a big plane that was going to take her away from me. And she was carrying a little suitcase. She's wearing a nice dress. So I couldn't stand that image. So I called her up. I said, Daisy, we got to talk. What about? She said. I said, Daisy, I can't tell you on the phone. We have to see each other. And she didn't really, it was a long pause. And so finally I got her to agree. So a couple of days later, I go to her door, I knock on the door. She opens it up, just a crack. And she sticks her part of her head out. You can see just her left eye, and the right half of her face is behind the door. And she's very suspicious. She's looking at me. This lasted for a few seconds. And I said, well, may I come in? She slowly opens the door, doesn't say a word. So I go in. I have this little box. I open this little box, take out a ring, and I put it on her finger. And she cries. And we hug. And kids, we're engaged. Just like that. And so, well, if you're engaged, you got to get married. You got to have a wedding. So we said, now this is the 60s. Bob Dylan, times are changing. We don't have to use the normal language, in the wedding language. But there was this one, we checked out some of the language, and there was this one phrase. It was, till death do us part. And I said, Daisy, this boilerplate language, all the weddings have it. We'll just throw it in there. And she said, no, I don't want that language in there. I said, what? Don't you have any commitment to the, I wondered if she's committed to the marriage. And she said, no, if we have to be married until death do us part, we've had a few little fights here. What happens if, what happens if we don't like each other after a while? So I said, okay, yeah, all right, you're right. So let's just skip it. We'll leave it out. Well, the wedding was right up here and in Ames Chapel, but no Brazilians were there, which was sad because it was too expensive, and the wedding was coming too quickly. So, Reverend Kathleen has already told about the hitchhiking trip to Brazil. It was wonderful. We got backpacks, T-shirts, jeans, sandals. We just dressed perfect for it. And we got out to the road and stick our thumbs out. And Daisy was in front so that they would see her first. And car after car, truck after truck, they'd stop for us and they'd take us through Mexico, Central America, down into South America. It really worked great. And the other thing that happened was in Minnesota, Daisy was completely dependent on me. On this trip, total flip-flop. I was completely dependent on her. She knew Spanish. She knew the Latin culture. I didn't know Spanish. I didn't know the Latin culture very well. By the way, thank you for that wonderful music. It was really great. And so she was in charge, and I was just, this little puppy dog, following along. Daisy was she called the shots. So that was a new thing for me to see this person. Well, we get down to Brazil, and I find out a couple things about Daisy. One thing, she lives in a fairly highly charged family, high voltage people down there. And Daisy, when each of the family, they all had opinions, and they loved to give advice to people. And they give advice to each other, and then there'd be some fights. And anyway, she was the peacemaker. That was her role in the family, which was new to me. I didn't know that. Also, people remembered people that were not in the family, that she was a state champion swimming, 100, 200, 400-meter races. And she never talked about it. She never bragged about that to me. Another thing I noticed about her was she would never drink from a chipped cup or eat from a chipped plate. She said, we're not that poor. I thought, oh, okay. I mean, I'd eat from a chipped plate if it wasn't if it wasn't too big. A lot of you know that Daisy's a very generous person, and there were some early signs of this. When she was 5 years old, she gathered a bunch of her mother's most precious books, hardbound books on literature, and spent a lot of money to buy those books. And she went to the front of her house, which was right up against a public sidewalk. So she opened up the window and handed out books to strangers who were passing. And she said, "Take one. My mother's got all kinds of them." Well, also Daisy was very loyal. She's very loyal to her friends. And we decided to leave Brazil and go back to Minnesota after about 3 years. My job as teaching English at the university didn't pay very much at all. And Daisy's job was quite a bit better. She was a social worker. Her salary was a little bit better, but it didn't make for a sustainable middle-class life. So we decided to go back to Minnesota. Well, on the way, and then we took a camping trip with two friends, Gionema and Christian, and in a little Volkswagen. And so we're driving up the coast of Brazil for about a month, and it was really a great trip. However, Daisy started to have nightmares. Every night, she would dream of one of her friends running after her with a knife, wanting to kill her, running through a big house that had lots of rooms in it. And every night, it would be a different friend. One night, it would be Benita. Next night, it would be Osomar. Then it would be Fanny. Then it would be Liana. Then it would be Gionema, who was actually was with us on the trip. They all wanted to kill her. But she had a final dream. In this dream, she was being chased by Daisi. He was a young adolescent who lived in a poor part of town, whom she had counseled and helped a lot, and she really liked him. And he was the one who, as a teenager, maybe 15 or 16, sculpted this statue here. So he's chasing her with a knife through these different rooms. She turns with a pistol and shoots him. But he didn't die. He was just wounded in the dream. And that was the last of the nightmares. So she had faced her fears of abandoning her close friends, which was, like I say, it was very painful for her. Well, we arrived in Minnesota in January. And Daisy, she noticed some defects in Minnesota. Like, one of them was, it's really cold. Another one was, winter is really dark. Another one, it lasts forever. Another one, the neighbors don't even speak to us. I said, Daisy, come on, this is Brazil. I mean, this is Minnesota. In winter, nobody speaks to anybody until spring. I thought everybody knew that. Well, as Kathleen has already mentioned, and Marcus, she had a very strong work ethic, powerful work ethic. She was a great worker, terrific. And it was so good that she enjoyed sharing it with others, and like even with me. And so one day I was sitting on the couch. It was a lazy afternoon. I had a New Yorker magazine. It was this very fascinating article about 27 different kinds of sparrows, a real long article that they had. And I was just getting into this article when I felt kind of a shadow over me. And I looked up, and there was Daisy standing there. Have you fixed the drip in the bathroom? No. When? Tomorrow? No, right now. Like I say, she's got that terrific work ethic. So I got out of the couch, went down the basement, got the tools, went up to the bathroom, started to tinker around with the tools. I'm not a great fixer, but somehow I got it done. And so I came down into the kitchen, and she was standing there. And I said, I fixed the drip. And she reached up, grabbed my neck, and pulled my head down and gave me a kiss, which was a great moment. Plus, I had fixed the drip, too, which is another. Patience? No. She didn't have much. Actually, she would say, she herself recognized this. She said, and kids, this is a good one to keep in mind, okay? Everyone is put on earth to learn a lesson. And for her, that lesson was patience. I can still hear her voice. Just do it. Today. Or yesterday. Well, you can't do it yesterday. It's already today. But anyway, so that. She was also very compassionate. She had a kind of a heart that she could feel other people's situations. For example, in the morning paper would come, put it on the table, breakfast table. I'd look at it. Oh, here's an interesting story about something that just happened in the world. Daisy would look at the same story. No, it's not just interesting. Some little guy or little people are being screwed by the big people. And, that's a morality play. That's the way she saw the story. And then she'd bristle at the injustice. Well, I think that was terrific. I wish I could be like Daisy and have that kind of sense of, compassion, sense of injustice, but I don't know, I just don't quite have it. I try to, though. Well, another thing, she was decisive. Another example of this was, kids, I think some of you might remember this one. We were taking care of Zadie, who was 8 years old, and Nico and Bea, and they were restless, so we decided to take them to Como Park. So Zadie was sitting on our bed in the bedroom, and I could just see her like this. She had her hands crossed. She said, I'm not going to go. I said, come on, Zadie, you're going to go. No, I'm not going to go. I can stay here by myself. So we're talking about this. All of a sudden, Daisy bursts in. How come you're here? We're all set. What's happening? And I said, well, Daisy, maybe it's okay. Just let her see. She doesn't want to go. And Daisy says, no, she's going. Oh, no, Daisy, okay. So Daisy leaves. And I said to Zadie, come on. It's decided. You're going. Let's just get over with it. And she says, do you always do everything your wife tells you to? My manhood was attacked. And then I said, well, no, this is keep alive, keep on this one, kids. I wanted to tell Zadie, marriage, it's flexibility. You got to be flexible. Compromise. You don't always get to do what you want to do. In my case, it's just do what Daisy says. She wasn't too impressed. Well, Daisy had kind of a difficult time with money. Of course, money is always a flashpoint. But every once in a while, she'd go on a credit card austerity program. And she'd say, I'm going to get rid of our Sears debt. I'm going to get rid of the Target debt. I'm going to get rid of our Dayton's debt. And I'm going to get rid of the biggest debt of all, our Visa debt. Well, she said it out loud. I heard her. She's committed. And so, yeah, great, terrific. We're going to, get a grip on our money situation. But imperceptibly, over the little few days, time goes on, her austerity campaign just vanishes in little puffs of smoke. And it's all over, and our debt starts to build up again. Well, anyway, she did have a sense of humor. And every year, the kids would pull the same 2 tricks on her. Every April Fool's Day, the same 2 tricks. She'd come down for breakfast. Her face would be all tight, and she's getting ready for work. She's got that work ethic going. And she sits down on a wet chair. Well, kids, you can't go to work with a wet bottom. I think that's just not right? But then she would run to the kitchen with her mouth full of salty coffee. That old trick, the salt and the sugar. The boys really loved duping their mom. It was terrific. They loved it. Well, what about love? One day, Daisy and I, this is later on in our life, we're strolling on a beach in Brazil. Beautiful night, beautiful evening. So uncharacteristically, she says she enjoys being with me. Oh, and she even loves me. Well, I was speechless. Because in our relationship, we rarely use the love word, because I guess we just didn't want to wear it out or whatever. For some reason, so I said, I hope I'm not too boring. And she said, you are. And so am I. So there's that brutal honesty that she had. Well, let's get to her last days on earth. 1 month ago, Daisy decided living with progressive supranuclear palsy was no longer worth it. I'm going to stop eating and drinking on April 1st. What? April 1st? Why? Because there's no family birthdays around them to make people sad. So I want to say one thing here at this point. This was not a suicide. A suicide is secretive, it's violent, it can be ill-considered, and it's usually devastating to other people. This was not what Daisy was doing. She shared her decision with others. She was not keeping it as a secret. She just wanted to die with dignity and let nature take its peaceful course. Well, it was a brave decision. In one way, it's because she said she didn't know what lies on the other side of life. She was going into the unknown. But she said, frequently she'd say, I envy the Christians who believe in heaven, where there are no wheelchairs, no coughing, no fatigue, and you just wait up there for your children, your friends, to come up and join you in that wonderful place. So 13 days later, I was holding Daisy's hand when she took her last breath. It was a stunning moment. I suppose if there is a holy moment, that would be it. Here she is, she's living, and then she's gone. And just like that. Well, I felt it was really a deep privilege to be there with her and holding her hand at that point. Nothing like that has ever happened to me, probably will never happen again. Her face was very peaceful. It was thinner after the 13 days of not eating, and she resembled the face that she had when I first met her. Death had turned her beautiful. I also want to say thank you to the Carondelet village where she stayed for her last 16 months. The staff, they were wonderful to her. They very respectful. They formed personal relationships with her, some of them. And in the last few days, several of them came to her room and and asked permission if they could say goodbye to her. To end this story, I hope Daisy visits me in my dreams. And I would like to have a dream like this. She would be standing up to her hips in a lake, again, like we would sometimes go to Minnesota lakes. This would be a northern Minnesota lake amid some fragrant pines. I'd stand on the shore and I'd watch her far out there in the water. She might wave back to me. I'd wave back to her. And then I'd marvel at how this little woman had become so big in my life, magnifying it in ways I could never have imagined. And we'd wave to each other one last time.
The collage of voices, as I mentioned earlier, is our submissions that many of you and others have turned in, and they'll be read, alternated by myself and by our Director of Memorial Services, Terry Linsky. This first one is by son, Andre Martin. He said, if there is any singular talent that has been shared between the Martin men of this family, it has been the talent to marry up. In my lifetime, that has brought Evelyn, Daisy, Karen, and Mira into this family, and that has been key to anything good we've accomplished. Growing up with an example right in the home of what a smart, dedicated, fun, interesting woman is like, and how a relationship of two very different people can turn into a 50-plus year happy marriage, I'm sure has helped me find someone who can meet my mom's high bar. Now, how we all managed to convince these wonderful people to marry us in the first place is one of the great mysteries of life. And this from Mona Christensen. It's been my honor to get to know Daisy. Jim and Daisy, my cousin and cousin-in-law. She has always had a genuine, generous spirit. We connected with her love for a spicy manicure. She always let me know what color I should do, and she loved compliments about her nails. We had many heartfelt conversations during our manicure times. I will miss her, but I know she is at peace.
And this from Bill Lester. Daisy was a terrific person whose light shined through the most difficult of times. Our granddog Tucker is a 4-year-old Shih Tzu who perked up whenever I said, "Let's go see Daisy." Tucker was convinced that Daisy was an ancient Portuguese word for treat. At the Carondelet village, Tucker would regally enter the lobby and enthusiastically greet all of his fans, the residents and staff of the village. Wandering from person to person on the way to see Daisy was the canine equivalent of checking his email. Tucker would put his front paws on Daisy's lap, and she would give him a milk bone. He would always linger there a bit longer, just in case she had another one.
From Patty Haig. I met Daisy as a friend of a friend, part of a group of people. I could have easily been overlooked as she focused on those people in the group that she knew well, yet that was not Daisy's way of relating to people. She always treated me as a unique person and friend rather than overlooking me as someone who came with the group. Her ability to connect with people is part of why she was so loved and so good at her work over the years.
And this remembrance from Renee Oswald Anderson. I had the great privilege of knowing Daisy working in senior services before coming to the neighborhood house in 2002, which is when I really got to know Daisy and to see her in action. Daisy had a strong work ethic, expected a lot from her staff, who both loved and feared her all at the same time. She developed deep and lasting relationships, and many of us are here today. Daisy, Susan, and I started our birthday outings around 2005, which were full of laughter, food, wine, and dessert when Jim came. I am forever grateful to have gone to Brazil in 2018 with Susan to see Daisy's beloved Torres. We had such a good time, and Daisy and Jim were such gracious hosts. Who knew there were so many different kinds of beans and rice? Daisy's work literally touched and changed thousands of lives over the years. I will forever treasure our shared work, but more importantly, the deep friendship of one small but mighty lady.
From John Stenglein. Brazil was, I'm sure, Daisy's favorite place on earth, the place she most wanted to be. But I'm pretty sure her second most favorite place was the North Shore. Weather permitting, she loved to sit on the deck. She'd read or look out at the lake, the sky, the trees. How do I remember Daisy? I see her reading, walking hand in hand with Jim down a colorful, leaf-strewn path, sorting through rocks, looking at the lake, and sharing stories as we ate our meals, and laughing. She loved to laugh and was always kind enough to laugh at my dad joke level stabs at trying to be funny.
And this is from Deborah Gillis. Daisy was my boss, my mentor, but most of all, my friend. She was also a visionary when she hired me as a physical therapist to work in a social service position. Daisy mentored me as I moved into social services. She taught me so much and was wise, caring, and compassionate. Her friendship was a blessing in my life, and I will miss her deeply.
From Vani Sisahut. I met Daisy through my friendship with her son, Andre. Daisy was immediately kind and generous to me, and she always made me feel like part of the family. I had the honor of spending time with her family in Brazil, parents, siblings, nieces, nephews, when I visited Porto Alegre in 1998 with Andre. When I got married in 2004, Daisy welcomed my husband, Neil, and our children into her family, too. What a gift to know Daisy. She was a beautiful soul, and I feel so lucky to have known her.
And this remembrance from Sharon Stenglein. In the late 1970s, our family shared 2 weeks in Florida with the Martins. We had between us 5 young children, all under 8. On that trip, the children spent the day swimming and collecting shells on the beach. One morning, our daughter Rose, who was then 2, plunged into the pool with no floaties on her arms. Daisy, an expert swimmer, immediately rescued her from the bottom of the pool. They formed a strong bond that both have always remembered. When she took her test to become a U.S. citizen, I remember her being furious and letting the examiner know about it. The one question that she had been asked was, who is the President of the United States? She said, everybody in the world knows the answer to that question. I can tell you the 9 justices of the Supreme Court and the names of every one of the cabinet members, and all you ask me is the name of the president?
From Sherry Zigan. She will be forever missed and will leave a big hole in all of our hearts. It is impossible to sum up Daisy and her big personality in 200 words or less, but here are a few. This is an excerpt from a longer offering. She was passionate about helping people, loved her children, grands, and Jim beyond measure. She laughed about, I remember laughing about our long walk in Georgetown to see the stairs in The Exorcist, and only having our white tennis shoes show up in the picture. She loved her high heels, and she was sad when she couldn't wear them anymore. I remember viewing the Hope Diamond, which Daisy said was dusty. But Patrice had to drag us out of the Gems and Stone wing at the Smithsonian because Daisy loved her jewelry. Had never picnicked on a beach in Torres, so we did a little wine and cheese date, and she and Jim were the best tour guides, and so proud of that community.
And this from Susan Roskoski. So many of my fond memories of Daisy revolve around Neighborhood House. Working together on grants until late into the evening, shared happy hours with our colleagues, the angst over unwelcome changes or disappointments, and the rejoicing when we knew for sure that we were making a difference in people's lives. These made up the fabric of our lives and created moments to last a lifetime. Daisy never tired of those memories. To her, I owe a debt of gratitude for her never-ending hospitality and patience as I learned and came to love what she loved. I will miss my dear friend for so many reasons, but we will always be connected by heart.
From Brick Chapman. All of us who had the privilege of knowing Daisy knew that she had a wonderful sense of humor, was kind, compassionate, fiercely devoted to her family. She was also tenacious, as she demonstrated right to the end of her life. Incredibly courageous. I feel so fortunate that I had the honor and privilege of knowing Daisy. She brought love and joy and humor to all of us whose lives she touched.
And this remembrance from George Kaler. In all the times I have seen her and Jim since their meeting, I don't remember a single time when she wasn't friendly, smiley, and empathetic. This extends to the last few years when she was battling her terrible affliction. Her smile might have lost some of her radiance, and her laughter might have been a bit more subdued, but she still conveyed pleasure in seeing someone and always taking an interest in their life. Daisy, you brightened the life of everyone you encountered, and you will be greatly missed.
From John Voy. Today, two of Jim's college roommates from 62 years ago, yes, 62 years ago, are here from New York and Colorado to honor Daisy and their lovely memories of her over the years. In 1980, all of Jim's college roommates first got together for a personal reunion, along with their wives and children in Minnesota, and in more recent years got together with their wives and without children, joining them in various states. The husbands with wives reunions enhance bonds among the roommates and the couples as all move through life. I remember and am so fond of Daisy.
And this from Karen Serfati. 40 years ago, I walked into Family Services of St. Paul to begin my new job as a social worker. I was told by my supervisor that I was very lucky because I was going to have Daisy Martin as my mentor. I soon learned how true that was going to be. As we worked with seniors in the communities, Daisy's high energy and skills encompassed the qualities of a great social worker. She had the unending empathy, patience, active listening, and true caring for all.
From Chip Peterson. Daisy was a key slab in a 4-generation Martin-Peterson friendship. Jim's parents and mine were Unity friends, and I have known Jim since we were 7 years old. We renewed our friendship as adults when Jim and I ran across each other on our bicycles and learned we were Tangletown neighbors married to a Brazilian and a Mexican. Our kids, Brian and Lisa, grew up counting Marcus and Andre among their closest friends, and now ties that have extended to our grandchildren. Daisy and Jim have been like siblings to Rosa Maria and me. Daisy's death leaves a huge void. I am eternally grateful for the ways she enriched our lives.
And this from Rosa Maria de la Cueva Peterson. Always a Brazilian at heart, Daisy to me was a sister, a loyal, generous friend, and a confidant. Passionate in her opinions and a still listener. Her determination often reaching stubbornness. She was one who could easily laugh and find incongruity amusing. Someone with whom to share the joys, pride, and tribulations of motherhood and grandmotherhood in another culture. One with whom to share the small but still very annoying deficiencies of our otherwise wonderful husbands. One to whom to share the views of our respective Latin American family, the state of the world, and late, the joy of art. We did not take our family friendships for granted. I will miss you, Daisy.
And finally, from Lisa Peterson de la Cueva. When I think of Daisy, I think of generosity, inquisitiveness, and her great sense of humor. Daisy always laid out a spread of delicious appetizers and drinks and dainty glasses and dishware, and we would chat in her beautifully curated and colorful living room. In my adolescence and adulthood, I remember gatherings at the Martins or Peterson's house where we roared with laughter over funny stories from Daisy's time at Neighborhood House, got in deep to Gavioli family happenings, delve into wandering conversations over the continuing education courses Daisy took in her retirement years, or learned about international films that she and Jim had watched through their film club in Torres. Her caring for others, coupled with her active mind, made her a great conversationalist. But more importantly, it made her a superb auntie and friend. I am privileged to have had her in my life. Please join me in a word of prayer. O thou Spirit of mystery, of life and love, we gather indeed with grief and gladness, while also holding the wonder of life, this spirit which endows and animates all that is. Be with us, Spirit of love, as constant companions on our journey, as we remember all that Daisy was and all that she gave to the world. In these and more, may we know the love she expressed reflected, and enriched. We offer this prayer in the name of that which holds us all, that which connects us each and to all that is, and in the spirit of deep gratitude for this one precious life, and to the love which holds us all and binds us to the living, and to the love beyond death. Amen. We have heard about Daisy's life and what was important to her, and it is our time now to turn once again to our own lives and discern what lessons of hers we might wish to embody. And now we turn to you, Daisy, to offer our final benediction. May the universe hold you and receive you. May you be whole and at peace. Those who mourn you and mourn for you will know you always in their hearts. Though we extinguish this flame, we know that the spark of life still burns within each of us, and we know that the light of Daisy's life will continue to shine within us. In the spirit of love, we have gathered. In the spirit of love, we depart. Gentle people, go in peace. Amen. And may it be so.